Welcome, everybody. So good to see you here tonight. The few that I see here in the chat so far, if you're watching, I would love to know where you're streaming in from. It's a wintry, cold kind of, well, I think the snow is finally slowed down out there. So hopefully the Wi-Fi is going to be okay. I did have some snow today. Not as bad as some storms in other places, but do have to get some shoveling and plowing done. But so a few people in the chat. Monique in Maryland. Hey. New York Knitter in Central New York. Hi. Joan. Hey, Joan in Kansas City. I think that's all we have in there for now, but I'm so glad you're here with me tonight. And I see some who've already been in the course. We are going to be talking about the course later on. This is sort of one of the things that we talk about in our course, Knits That Fit, teaching you how to take any top-down raglan or circular yoke pattern and customize it to fit your body, whether that's bust shaping or adjusting for the sleeves or the body length, adding waist or hip shaping, adjusting the sleeve length. So many things you can modify, and we cover a lot of them. I want to say most of them in that course, but we're going to talk about one specific part that I know a lot of people have issues with, and that is bust shaping. Because I have said in the past, and you've probably heard other people say this, that if you have a larger bust and sometimes you choose a pattern based on your full bust, it ends up way too big in the top. If I have volume issues, please let me know. I'm testing out a new microphone and I'm hoping it is better for the volume, but just let me know if it sounds bad or anything like that. Oh, hey, we've got a few more people. Kara in the Philly Burbs. Hey, nice to see you here. And Karat, hey, Karat, another student in the course in Maryland. And then Marcy in South Wales, UK. Hi, thank you over the ocean. Glad you're here tonight. So we're going to talk about bust shaping. I do have some slides, so we're going to go to those. So yes, top-down sweaters, super popular. I mean, you've got the set-in sleeves and all of the other ones, but two really popular ones are top-down raglan sweaters and top-down circular yokes. But they're not, you can't like choose based on your full bust all the time. And it will vary depending on sweater. So in the case of a raglan, you have two choices depending on your cup size, basically, or your bust size. If you're anything lower than a C cup, use your full bust. That's totally fine. If you're larger than that, and the larger you are from that, but then you use your full bust measurement, it'll fit over your full bust plus that desired ease that you want, but then it's going to be too big in the top, through the shoulders, because our bust measurement can change throughout our life. Our weight fluctuates. Those places on our body where we can be fleshy, like our bust, our stomach, our hips, our arms, all of those can change and fluctuate. But what doesn't change and fluctuate is our skeleton, like your wrist measurement. I mean, you can get a little bit of fat on there, but not too much. Your upper torso measurement, oh, try not to touch my microphone. That upper torso doesn't change. I mean, it might a little bit, you might have a little extra fat there, but not a ton. So this measurement is super important because of that, because it doesn't change. So when it comes to choosing a sweater for fuller busts, this is an important measurement to have. For some sweaters, not for every sweater. Drop shoulders, not so important because that sweater is going to be way off your shoulders and down on your arm somewhere anyway, so it's going to be so much bigger than your bust because of the way it fits. Raglan sweaters are that iffy area. If you want like an oversized sweatshirt kind of raglan, then yes, you could use your full bust. You're going to get that oversized kind of t-shirt look up here. If you want it more fitted, then you need to use that upper torso measurement if you're a C cup or larger for a raglan sweater. But then when it comes to a yoke, if you think of a circular yoke, if you've ever knit one or you've seen one, or a pie shawl, like all laid out, a pie shawl and a circular yoke are basically the same thing, except like the circular yoke has a place for your head in the center, but it's knit from that center out into a big circle. So by the time you get that circle done, it's already sitting where your bust is. So you don't really want to use your upper torso measurement here, because by the time the yoke is finished, it has to accommodate your full bust. So that's the big difference. You need the upper torso measurement for a raglan if you want it to be fitted. If it's oversized, not so much. But if you want a fitted raglan, you need that upper torso measurement if you're larger than a C cup. If you're knitting a yoke sweater, that's not such an important measurement, because by the time you finish knitting that whole circle, it's already at the point of your bust. So, but there are other things you can do to accommodate it so it's not so oversized, because I do think, especially in a circular yoke, some negative ease is all right. Now, I don't mean like a super skin tight sweater, but if you think of like the curves of your body, like you're not a block in the front. So it will have like maybe just skimming over you, and then be like a tiny bit of negative ease just at the apex of your bust, and then it skims back down again. Less and less ease, or more and more ease in those other places. So you're getting into the negative ease just across the fullest part of your bust, but not anywhere else. So I like to like sort of use my full bust measurement, but I usually pick a size that's either my full bust measurement to begin with, or maybe like an inch smaller, and it's still going to have enough room through the top and not be too big, and it'll still fit my bust. A little bit of negative ease is okay if you have a larger bust. It really is. Excuse me. Okay, just seeing we've got some more people here. Hey, Anita in New Zealand, and Latitude in Idaho. People from all over, and Northern Ireland. Hi. This will be so helpful. Thank you for sharing your wealth of knowledge. You're very welcome. And then in North Dakota as well. Hey, everybody. I'm so glad you're here. So I get distracted. I see the chat moving over there, and I want to come say hi. So raglans, yes, we do want to think about that comparison between the upper torso and the full bust if you're C cup or larger. C cup is kind of iffy. You can go either way if you need to add more or not, depending on how oversized you're planning to knit that. And then a yoke, you still have to think about your full bust, but it's okay to have a little bit of negative ease just across the full bust. The whole sweater is not going to be like all super skin tight. Just going to be like you're wearing a t-shirt that's fitted. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't have to be super skin tight everywhere, but it's just kind of fitted over your bust. That's what you're going for. If you have a larger bust, you still need that full bust measurement. Okay, so we're going to talk about, I think I had a list of 7 different ways, because if you're knitting that raglan, like I said, and you have to use your upper torso measurement, and then you run into this issue. Like for me, I think I have like a 5-inch difference between my upper torso and my full bust. So if I choose a size based on my upper torso, maybe add 2 inches of ease, which will get you like a standard fit, that's still 3 inches smaller than my full bust, which 3 inches of negative ease is a little too much for me. Maybe an inch or so isn't so bad. 3 is starting to move into too tight territory. So this is when we have to think about what we can do to accommodate the bust without using it as a base for the pattern, because when we do that, too big. It's too big through the shoulders. I can't say that enough. But there are ways you can accommodate your bust, but still start out with a smaller size using that upper torso measurement. I think I had 7 ways. So we're going to go through all of those. Some of them work for raglans. Some of them will work for yokes. Some of them will work for both types of sweaters and other sweaters as well. Like some of these, well, you'll see what I mean. We're going to get to some of these. Okay. So these are 2 options that will work with these types of sweaters, and other ones, if you're knitting like in the round from the bottom up, you could do the same thing. But we are talking top-down sweaters because that's what the class is about. So let's say if you've knit one of these before, then you know what I'm talking about here. If not, then this is part of what you would be knitting at, like you're casting on, you're doing your neckline, you're doing your increases, whether that's like circular yoke shaping or whether it's raglan shaping. Either one of those is going on, and then at some point you have to separate the body from the sleeves. At that point, it's all either like a big circle, if it's a circular yoke. If it's a raglan, it's more like a giant rectangle, and you can really see like, oh, these are the sleeves on the sides and this is the front and the back body. It's more of like a rectangle shape, and you can tell where it is because of those raglan lines. So once that yoke depth is reached, whether it's a raglan or a circular yoke, you're going to divide everything up, like the front body and the back body and the two sleeves. And usually the sleeves will go on some waste yarn or barber cord or spare needle cord, whatever. And you cast on some extra stitches at the underarm. So this is a good place to actually add in some bonus stitches. And it's also a good place if you're choosing a size and the sleeve is a little on the snug side too. If it's like, say, less than 2 inches of ease, you want a little ease in the arm, because then you get into like that sausage casing territory if it's too fitted. So you want like a couple inches of ease in the arm of your sweater. So if it's a little iffy in the ease department, this helps with that as well. So you can cast on 1 inch or 2 inches of extra stitches at each side, and that would add some extra to the circumference of your sweater, and it would also add some extra to the circumference of the sleeve. Now, if the sleeve is already oversized, this might not be the best way to add some extra circumference to the body of the sweater, because, you know, if your sleeve's already too big, because you're going to come back later and pick up your sleeve stitches from those cast on stitches. And if you've added extra, then you're going to add more to the sleeve, and then it gets to be too big if it's already too big. So this is why I like options, because it depends on the pattern. Like if the sleeve is really slim, you might be able to sneak in some extra cast on stitches and it won't be such a big deal. But if it's already oversized, then you just choose another option. We have lots of options. I mix and match all the time. I don't always just use one. Like, well, I'm going to go through all of them, but you might use 2 or 3 different options to get those extra stitches, depending on how many extra inches of fabric you need for your full bust. But that is the first one, adding those extra stitches at the underarm, but knowing that it's going to add extra circumference to your sleeve as well. That's important to remember. Sometimes you want that, sometimes you don't. And then after you've separated, those sleeves are on hold and you're just knitting the body, depending on the length of the yoke, but where you're like basically you put that yoke on, and then how much more distance do you have to get before you're at your full bust? It's probably going to be a couple inches at least, unless it's a super deep yoke, and then you're getting into like swancho territory where the body, I don't know if I like the swanchos, but they're a choice, because you can't raise your arms unless your whole sweater is going to come up too, and sometimes we don't want that. So if the armhole is pretty much where your armhole is, you probably still have like a good 3, 4, 5 inches between where that armhole is, or you've separated for the underarm, and your full bust. So you can add some stitches along what I would call the side seams. Like when you cast on those underarm stitches, I put a marker on each side right at the center of that cast on, and those sort of act as my side seam markers, so I know where the right and the left sides are on the sweater. Then if I want to do any waist shaping, like add some A-line shaping or something like that, or some additional stitches for the bust, I can sneak them right there. It's in the underarm area. Nobody's going to see that unless you raise your arm. And well, unless it's another knitter and they want to see like your sweater. And I have actually had this issue with somebody before. We were talking about how to close up the hole at the, like when you're you're picking up stitches for your sleeve and you want to close up the holes. And she wanted to see my sweater to see how I had done it. So it does happen if you're with other knitters, you might have to show them the underarm of your sweater. But most other people are not going to be looking. So you can sneak in some increases at that point. Or if you're working bottom up and you've added some extra shaping, that's where you would decrease it away as well in that same spot. So these options work for both raglans and yokes and other sweaters too. So casting on extra stitches at the underarm and then doing some sneaky increases. Not like a ton, but maybe every couple rounds or so, and you can probably sneak in a couple of inches of extra increases right there. So you would work to your side seam marker, work a make one right or something like that. Work across the front of your sweater, work a make one left at the other side seam. So you'd be working one increase on each side of just the front of the sweater, because of course we're talking about bust shaping. So we want to add that extra fabric right there. And also a note, this kind of stuff, not all of them, but this one will work for, let's say your bust is, average, you don't have to do any extra bust shaping, but you might have a belly or hips or bum, then you can also work these increases down lower where you want to put that extra fabric. That works too. Okay, so those are like the generic ones you can kind of plug in anywhere. Now for raglans specifically, this one, so you have to have knit a raglan or have an idea of what it looks like. Like it's got those sharp diagonal lines where you're working your increases and stuff like that. You can add extra ones. Like a lot of the time a pattern, I should see what everybody is. Okay, just popping. Oh, I see Montreal and Quebec. Hey people, you're my people. Oh, and Karat, you're gonna, yeah, I saw that you joined. So you're gonna knit your husband a sweater. That's really good. Okay, I'm getting distracted by the chat. Stop looking over there. Okay, so raglans specifically, when we're talking about raglans, that has that sharp diagonal line where the sleeves and the body all join together. And when you're working top down, you're doing all these increases. 8 increases usually, 2 for each sleeve, 2 for the front, 2 for the back. So let's say your pattern has you doing a plain knit round and then an increase round where you're increasing 8 stitches and then a plain round and just repeating that over and over. You don't want to mess with the first 2/3. Like if you're choosing that size based on the upper torso, use that. You're going to cast on for that upper torso size and then work that about 2/3 of the length of the whole yoke. And then in that final third, you're going to add some extra increases on those raglan lines. Now it is going to make your raglan, like you're not going to get like a sharp diagonal because you're adding extra stitches. So it's going to be diagonal, diagonal, and then it's going to curve. It's going to curve out because you're adding more stitches, but just along the front body, like those 2 points right here. So you'd add an extra one here and an extra one here, just across the front, because that's where we want that extra fabric. But you're going to wait until the final third because you want to keep that sharp diagonal line. That last third starting to get hidden in that underarm. We got lots going on in the underarm that we can hide. So this is where we would work some of those extra increases on those plain rounds. So you have your increase round where you're doing all your increases. The next round is plain. All the other stitches just knit, but then sneak in an extra increase on either side, just on the full bust on the front. Now, another option is if it's starting to feel like there's too many extra stitches that you need to put in right there, you can still work some, but then also place a marker in like an inch or so from that front raglan line and work another increase at that point too. Well, 2 points. You'd have one on either side, but you're going to save it for that bottom third because it's going to kind of hide in the underarm. Nobody's going to see it except other knitters who want to see your underarm. So that's another way to add some extra increases. The last raglan method would be a short row bust start. Now, I don't put this in like the yoke sweater category because like I said, when you're knitting that big circle part of the yoke, by the time all of those increases are done, it should be out here, more or less around the tip of your shoulder. And then if you think of it like a big circle, it's already like on your bust, almost. So we need it to fit over our full bust by the time we get out to here on that circular yoke. So a short row bust start, we don't really need that because we already need the full circumference for our full bust. And I put it here with a caveat as well. I do use this, but only with certain sweaters, not every sweater, because, and you've probably heard me talk about this one before, but I'm going to say it again, because our bust can move depending on the undergarments we are wearing. Like you might have a really good Sunday best undergarment that keeps things nice and perky. You might have a laundry day undergarment that, you know, is not so perky. So trying to say all the things without letting Facebook or YouTube thinking like this is some weird video. But anyway, so a short row bust start, when you work it in a very specific location by measuring your particular bust. Like you have to measure your bust and place it so it's going to fit where your bust is located in your sweater. And of course that can change depending on the undergarments you wear. So if you knit a sweater after having measured yourself with your Sunday best undergarments, and then you wear a different undergarment with that same sweater, it probably will be okay because the sweater is going to stretch. You know, I mean, it's a sweater. It's got stretchy fabric. but it might not look its best because that, depending on how big that short row bust dart is, it does add like a cup of fabric in the front. Like if you've done one before, you've washed your sweater and it's laying flat, depending on the size of that, it has like a little cup. It can have a cup on the front. And that cup can, you know, it's going to be specifically where you want it. And that can, well, that's going to stay in the same place, even if your undergarments change the location of your bust. So I do like it. I do use it, but it's not my first choice because I want to be able to wear whatever undergarments I want with my sweaters most of the time. I have used them when it's a very fitted sweater. I have a top-down raglan that I knit, and I did put a bust dart in it, but I also did some other things. So I only had to add like an inch, so it was a pretty small bust dart, so nothing too big. The larger it gets, like let's say I wouldn't go bigger than 3 inches. I'm talking like, you know, that much extra length in the front. The bigger it gets, the harder it is to disguise. Like you only have so many stitches to work with on the sides to put that in there. So there are, I like to combine methods, and if I use a short row bust dart, it's like 2 inches or less, just to keep things on the safe side. Okay, so we've covered both. We've covered the other options for raglans, and now we have some options, more options for yoke sweaters as well. So for a yoke, if you've knit a circular yoke, you know you've got like 3 or 4 rounds where you're doing a whole bunch of increases and then like plain knitting in between. Or you might have a pattern that has like the increases are kind of like wedge shaped and they're sort of fitting in like a stitch pattern or a colorwork yoke or something like that. There's different ways to get all of the increases in, but in a really basic sweater, it's like 3 or 4 rounds where you're doing lots of increases with like some plain rounds in between. So it's easier to do with that kind of a yoke. If you're doing a yoke where it does have like very detailed stitch patterns and they're like the increases are more precise within the stitch pattern, this is a little harder to do. So I like when I'm looking at a yoke pattern to see where it would be the best way to add in some extra increases if I need them. And this is also a good way to add in extra sleeve increases. If you're finding the sleeve is too snug, you can do some of these same things as well. So if you're doing a pattern that has like 2 or 3 or 4 like big increase rounds, you can sneak in some extra increases if it will fit within whatever your stitch pattern is. Then I like to look at like the stitch pattern multiple, and then I'll decide how many stitches do I want to add. Can I fit it within, like if there's some kind of a stitch pattern, can I fit in another multiple of that stitch pattern and will it still look okay? It does get more difficult when you've got like colorwork yokes going on, but it's not impossible. You can also add an extra, like not even like the other increase rounds. Let's say you've done all the increases, like your stitch pattern is done. You're like still have like an inch or so to do with your yoke and it's just like plain knitting. You can sort of figure out, like I like to place markers at that point for my sleeves and the front and the back, just so I know where everything is. And you can like do just some increases right across the front, like it's just another increase round in your yoke, but it's just right across the front. So that will add some extra right where you need it. So you can start with a smaller size and then add some extra down here where you need it. And then you can also add some raglan shaping. In that bottom third again, you're going to do your circular yoke just the same, like out to your shoulders and maybe a bit past. And then that last bit right here where it's getting to the underarm, you can work out, like place those markers so you've got like the sort of the body and the sleeves divided, and start doing some raglan shaping just along the front. Do some make ones like right along the front to get you some extra fabric here. And my last trick, I guess, it is a trick. It's my favorite thing to do and I love to do it and I do it all the time with yoke sweaters, is to move the sleeves back, is how I refer to it. So you finished the whole yoke, you haven't divided the sleeves and the body yet. It's one giant circle. And usually at that point, you're like, if you've cast on at the back neck or whatever, then you're knitting to like the first sleeve, putting everything on hold, casting on your underarm, knitting across the front, blah, blah, blah. So instead of doing that, I kind of mark things out, like where the sleeves are, how many stitches I have in each sleeve, how many stitches in the front, how many stitches in the back. Because one of the things that happens when you do choose like a size based on your full bust with the yoke is and your bust is bigger than like a C cup, you need that extra fabric in the front. You don't need it in the back. But a circular yoke kind of divides everything right in half for the front and the back. So you end up with not quite enough in the front and maybe too much in the back. So you get like this billowy fabric in the back that you don't want. So this method takes some of that fabric out and moves it to the front. So I would put my markers like where the pattern is going to tell me like where you're going to divide the sleeves and the body. And then I stop and I think, okay, and I would measure myself like around my full bust. And then I would put on, well, this t-shirt, yeah, it does have seams. So I would put on a shirt that has like side seams, or if my bra has like seam lines, I would measure around my full bust, and then I would measure from one seam across to the other seam, just across the front, subtract that from the full bust, and that tells me how many like extra inches I am in the front compared to the back. Let's say like you're 3 inches more. Let's say that you are, I don't know, 42. But my math, like numbers just go out of my head. 42 let's say 40, that makes it easy. And you are 24 across the front. And whatever the difference between 24 would be, subtract that for me. Somebody do math. So that would be the back. So you'd have those, that's the extra that you need across the front that you don't need in the back. So I would convert that to like a stitch count. You know, let's say the pattern is 5 stitches to the inch. Then I would take, let's say I needed those 3 or 4 inches. I would multiply, let's say 3, let's go with that, times those 5 stitches to the inch. That would be 15 stitches. So I would think, okay, I'm going to take 15 stitches from the back and put them in the front. So then all I would do is like move my sleeve markers back. So some of those extra stitches are moved from the back to the front. Does that make sense? Like it's hard to explain. Like I think it's easy to, like, if you've got like the yoke laid out and you're like, okay, I'm just going to move some of these stitches. You're just like moving the sleeves back, you're just kind of placing them further back than you normally would, just to take some of the extra fabric out of the back and put it in the front where you need it. Oh, Marcy says 16. Is that my math? I don't, thank you. I don't know. You get live and you get all this stuff on your screen and the numbers just go out of my head. I'm not good at math to begin with, so. But basically, yes, you find the difference between your full bust and just the front part, convert that number of inches to stitches, and that's the number of stitches you want to take. Like, let's say you have 100 stitches for the back and 100 stitches for the front. Well, you're going to take 15 of those stitches from the back and add them to the front instead, basically by moving the sleeves back a little bit. Oh, Marcy says crystal clear. Good, good, good. Okay, Joan, you've got a question. Is there a relationship between, let's move that over so I can see it. Is there a relationship between front bust and back bust measurements, which dictates when we can't move sleeve stitches from back to front? I haven't run into a time where I haven't been able to use this method, but specifically for circular yokes, like you couldn't do it with raglans because you have those really defined increased lines, so it's going to look really weird if all of a sudden your sleeves are moved back. But with a yoke, because it's all done in one thing, but again, it also depends, depending on the stitch pattern as well, you might have to take that into account. I do like to see, like, if the circular, like all of the color work and stuff is done before separating the sleeves and the body, then you can get away with it. If the color work is coming down into the body, it's a little bit harder, but I mean, it's not impossible. It changes depending on the sweater. I'm trying to think if there's a situation where I wouldn't. I can't think of a time when I would not use it, but I'm not entirely, I'm stumped. When we can't move sleeve stitches. Well, with a circular yoke, I've just never had, it hasn't come up yet where I haven't been able to, because this is probably my go-to for a full bust when it comes to moving some of that fabric, because I don't like the extra fabric in the back. I had one of my first yokes, it did have that. But I guess the one time it would be if you've got some kind of stitch patterning going on and you really have to account for that as well. Let me see, does anybody have any questions? I think that was it for, those are all the different ways to add shaping. But let me see, does anybody have any questions? I'm going to pop over here and look real quick. And grab a quick drink. But like I said, I mix and match depending on the sweater. I've done a raglan where I did some extra increases. I did a few extra increases just at the bottom. I cast on a few extra stitches at each underarm, and then I did like a 1-inch bust dart. So I used 3 different methods with that. I've done circular yokes where the only thing I did was move the, I chose one based on my full bust, but it's like a, I think it was like 1 inch actually smaller. I had an inch of negative ease at the full bust, which meant I still had like 4 inches of positive ease up here. So it was still not super tight, and it was just like a bit of negative ease just across the front. The only thing I did with that one was move the sleeves back. So I moved some of that back fabric to the front, because if you've done a circular yoke and you do have a fuller bust, you probably had that issue where you put it on and you're like, you have all this extra fabric in the back. We don't want that. We want that in the front where we need it, not on our back. Oh, dictates. Okay, I was trying to figure out what that was. But no, which dictates when and I don't know. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't do it with a raglan because you already have those lines on there, so you don't want to mess with that. But if it's like a pretty plain circular yoke and you've already finished, like if there's some kind of patterning and it's all done, then I would like a lot of the time circular yokes have like you're casting on right the back neck. So let's say you had 15 stitches, round it to 16, so you can take 8 from each side in the back and move them to the front. But then I would like, if there's stitch pattern, make sure it's balanced still. That's why I try to evenly divide them, to make sure everything is still balanced if there's a stitch pattern. But I can't think of any other time when I wouldn't. But this is for me, like specifically for circular yokes. I don't think I would, I mean, you couldn't use it with a set and sleeve or anything like that. But for a circular yoke, when it's one big circle, you can do that. Would this work for men as well? My son lost 100 pounds. Good for him. And has some extra skin in the front that he's self-conscious about. Yes, all of these, I have to go back through the list and think, but I have a belly and I have hips and I have a bum. So I do some of these other things, waist shaping as well. You can do like a short row bust dart. You can move it because you're putting it extra fabric length where you need it. And I mean, I'm talking about it for a bust specifically, but you can do it lower down. Like if you need it for a belly or a stomach or your hips or something like that, you just need, well, not hips, but for a belly, yes. Or even for like a dowager's hump or something like that, you can do short row bust, like a dart basically, to add that extra length on the back too. But yes, it would work for a stomach. Yes, you could do that. You could do the increases on the sides, like put some increases on those side seam markers to give some extra fabric across the front. So it could still be more fitted in the top around his shoulders. And then, yeah, you would do like some increases along the sides. A short row dart. I won't call it a bust dart, but a dart that could work like in the location of where that extra skin is. You could put it right there over that to give him a little extra length in that area. I think that's it. I'm trying to read back through them. Like all of the yoke ones are really specific to the bust area, but some of these, yes, would definitely work. Okay, now I know that there are some students here already, but we are going to just go through one more question. Do you have a video for short row darts? I do not. It's on my list to do. This just came up too in our last live stream, and I put a link in there to like a blog post on, I can't remember the It's a knitwear designer, but I think it's very clearly explained. She's got pictures. She's got like how to work out the calculations, because it depends. Like you can't just say this many stitches and this many inches, because it depends on the size you want for the dart. But if you go back and look at the last live stream, Tuesday's live stream, there are 2 links to like vertical darts and horizontal darts in there. And I think that there, but you can also Google this and find, I found blog posts. I haven't found any YouTube videos, so it's on my list to do a video specifically about this topic, but on the list, like I can't say when I'm going to get to it, but there are some good articles or blog posts online. But I will get to that video sometime. But it is, I just want to show this. I'm not going to like turn this into a whole like sales pitch, but this is the only time we're going to be having this class again, probably until next year, because I'm working on some other things. So if you want to join this class, it is like a 10-week group coaching program. You get full access to the course. Well, it's sort of dripped out, like we're going to work on one thing a week. But then you keep the access to the course, and then we have 11 coaching calls. Actually, we meet every week on Zoom, and I spend the whole time answering your questions. Like the whole point is to choose a sweater. Like you choose a top-down sweater, either circular yoke or raglan. There are like worksheets in the course. There are some lists of patterns. They're not like, these are the patterns you have to choose. They're just like recommendations of like basic patterns that you can choose, but you can really bring any pattern you want. And I will help you work through customizing it, like how to choose the right size. There's a lot of other things that we can talk about sizing. And then how to make all of these modifications. The bust is a big one for a lot of people, but there's also waist shaping or adjusting sleeve length, or even like combining sizes if your arms are larger than like the pattern size that you want to choose, or they're slimmer than the pattern size and you want smaller arms. There's lots of things we can do to customize. So the weekly coaching is all about that basically, and I try to actually demonstrate it. Some of the students are right here in the chat where we have like sat on the Zoom call and I've gotten my whiteboard and markers out and we've done the math to work through the steps. So this is basically what's included. You have, I don't even know how many like sections of material. We go through the whole sweater, from preliminary things like swatching and gauge, all the way from casting on, short rows for your neck shaping, all of like dividing the body, doing all of the waist shaping and sleeve shaping, any modification that you want to make. And it comes with like PDF worksheets that you can use and print and write on. There's a message board if you want to chat with other students. It's pretty quiet. I'm going to be honest about that. Like that's more for, I announce some things and people do post occasionally, but that's pretty quiet. And then of course we have our weekly Zoom sessions. So you can use your iPad or your phone or your computer and then join the session. And we just talk, like it's just a small group, and everybody can get a chance to ask their questions and work through their issues. And there is also like a bonus. I say it's a mini course, just sort of like about cardigans. So it's not a full-on course, but it covers some extra things about cardigans specifically that is helpful. So of course you need like yarn and choose a pattern. And these are some of the former students. And registration does close on Monday. And this is the last time I'm going to be offering it this year. So this is actually the schedule. Like we start with the preliminaries, talking about body measurements and taking measurements and swatching, taking gauge measurements. What happens if your gauge doesn't match the pattern, but you still want to use your gauge? We talk about all of that. And then the sweater, of course, is divided into sections: the yoke, the body and the sleeves, the body shaping, working on the sleeves, and then finishing. And then right here at the bottom, I think, is also the schedule. Like this is when every like section of the course is released, all of our Q&A sessions, when they're going to happen. I do alternate times to try to accommodate different time zones. So I'm in the Eastern time zone, so it'll be 6 p.m. Eastern alternating with 1 p.m. Eastern. So you can check your time zones. And of course, if you can't catch like this, if you can't join the live Zoom calls, the replays are available as well. And then you have like lifetime access. I'm not going to say my lifetime, like the lifetime of my business. You have like access to the course and all of the replays and everything is like right in your course dashboard. Let's see, does anybody have any questions? Got some chat going on here. Oh, I think I just answered that one. The weekly Zoom sessions, they alternate. We'll start the first one, our like kickoff call will be Tuesday night, next Tuesday at 6 p.m. Eastern, and then they alternate after that. So the next Tuesday would be at 1 p.m. and then the next Tuesday would be at 6 p.m. So they alternate back and forth. But yes, if you go like right on the, I think I have a link for the page that has all the information, and I put the schedule right on there. So 11 Zoom sessions altogether, plus all of the course stuff. And the things we've been talking about tonight, that's just one of the things. We cover a lot. This is probably a biggie though, like bust shaping is a biggie, but we cover a lot of other things too. Kara, moving the arm back trick for circular yoke. Sometimes the short row shaping to raise the back neck is happening. Oh yes. Let me see. I got to think about this one because I usually do my short rows right at the top because I like to hide them in like the neckline edging. So I work them so they stay like the short row turns hide like in your ribbing or whatever the edging is. So I prefer to work them there. So I got to think for a second if I was going to work, because yes, you work that before you divide the body and the sleeves. I think I've never done it before, so I'm going to say I'm not stumped. Let me think. I would knit the whole yoke. I would do my short row shaping. Yes, and then I would move those stitches. And I think that would work just fine. Because the short rows are just along the back and into the sleeves. Usually it's not too much in the front anyway. But I think it would be fine to move those stitches. I don't think it would be a big issue, but I've never actually done that. I always like to work my short rows up along the actual neckline. So now I want to try it, but I am like, I like my short row turns up here. But now I've got to test that one out, Kara. Thank you, Karat. It's a really great workshop. She's a former student and she's coming back. So, and Joan is too. The class is excellent. Aw, thank you so much, Joan. So yes, you can see these are some former students. I didn't ask them to come and say these things, but I'm glad that I helped you with your sweaters. And this is, I don't know, I'm pretty passionate about sweaters that fit. This is my thing, I think. Yes. Maybe do one round regular to close it. Oh yes, definitely. I would definitely finish off the short rows first, but then after that, I don't see a problem with moving the stitches. It shouldn't affect, because it's just adding length to the back, and I mean they do come into the sleeves too, but I don't think it would be an issue. But don't quote me on that because I've never done it. I'm just trying to think about it in my head. Okay. Does anybody have any more questions? That was it that I had to talk about tonight. The course does include a lot of other modifications. I will give you the caveat that you're going to have to do some math. It's not hard math, and I have worksheets to help you work through the math. And I'm truly being honest here. I don't like math. I'm not good at math. I need my calculator when I do this stuff, and then I still double check sometimes with my husband to make sure I'm right, because he's math genius. Like, just give him numbers and he'll start adding them up in his head. Me, I got to write them down and then like calculate. So I'm being very serious when I say if I can do the math for modifications like this, then you can too. Really, believe me. Seems like if you planned from the beginning for extra length in the front, it would work on a raglan. Well, I mean like the extra length from that's what the short row dart does. It's adding like extra length in that area. The problem with like working in the round is like everything is the same. That's why we do the short rows for the back neck, to add some extra length there. And that's why you would do the bust dart to add extra length on the bust or on the belly if that's where you need it. Yes, it would work, but yeah, you have to plan for it because when you're doing everything in the round, it's the same all the way around unless you stop and do some short row shaping in a specific area to add extra length to that area. What day of the week are the Zoom meetings? They're going to be on Tuesdays for this session. Tuesdays, 6 p.m. Eastern, and then alternating with Tuesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Now, it looks like all of our questions. I don't really have anything else. That was all on my list. Let me just check my notes again. So hopefully this has been helpful. I know it's just an overview. These are the things you can do with like any sweater, like to adjust the bust. You know, if you want to choose a size based on your upper torso, then combine all of these different ways. But they're just suggestions, like you pick and choose whichever one works for your particular sweater at that particular time. The next sweater might be totally different and you might choose different methods for that sweater. But if you do need more hands-on help, that's what the course is for, like to go in the Zoom sessions and ask your questions, and we do the math together, and we just work on that, and I can coach you through the process. For some people, this is plenty, like just having a list, and then they're just off to the races and they can figure this out on their own. But if you need more help, that's what the course is for. There is also a self-study version if you don't want Zoom calls and all that. There is a version where you just get the whole course right away and you just work through it at your own pace. But then there is this option where we have our coaching sessions every week, and I really like them. Like, it's just fun to meet with everybody and chat with everybody and help them make a sweater that fits. Okay, just checking one more time to see if we have any more questions. Oh, you're welcome, Kara. I'm glad that you enjoyed it. And hopefully this is helpful. But I think that is it for tonight. So I'm going to wrap it up right there. If you're catching the replay or anything like that, or you want to know more about the course, there is a link for it down below. It closes on Monday, January 27th. But after that, I will put a link for the self-study version or the wait list if you want to wait for a year. If you don't feel prepared for knitting a sweater like this right now, then maybe next year you will, and we'll open it up again. But that is it for tonight. Thank you so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one.